have more parks, but you just can't enjoy them because you'd be in in a Macintosh all the time. You'd be like just rained on consistently. I mean, that's true all the way through. I'm not sure what Wales is like actually, but definitely Manchester, Northwest, England is also very, very wet.
Yeah.
So that's just the general situation. We're talking about the weather, folks, because guess what? It suddenly got very cold in the UK. Very cold meaning like 15 degrees, right? But we were like 30 degrees about 3 days ago. So I've got no idea sort of how to deal with this huge temperature change. Anyway, we are live. So welcome, everybody. Welcome to Brainfood Live on Air, episode 78. Bringing it to you every Friday. We have got an amazing show for you today because we're coming up to the end of the third quarter, entering the fourth quarter, incredibly, of 2020. And we thought it would be a perfect time to do a bit of forecasting, or at least get some future lens going on for the next 12 months. And we've got some brilliant guests on to help us do that. Sarah Brennan of accelerant and Kevin Wheeler of the Future of Talent Institute. So that's going to be a superb set of guests to help us idiots talk about what's happening next in our industry. But before we kick off, let's do a quick AV and sound check as we usually do. Everybody on Crowdcast, can you hear me? If you can, just please say hello on the chat stream there. That should be on the right-hand side of the screen. We are multicasting, folks. We are on LinkedIn Live. So I hope, my God, I got 700 views last week on LinkedIn. I was so thrilled because I've been like trundling away on 200-300 for a couple of weeks. So if you're on LinkedIn, by the way, you can hear me, just say hello quickly on comments. Just make sure that the audio visual is fine there. I've got people watching this. I can't watch it myself, but someone else is actually monitoring my stream. So hopefully they can respond on my behalf. And we're also broadcasting this on Facebook group on Facebook, 3,000 members there, and we usually get several hundred people watching it on that platform. So if you're on Facebook and you're watching this, just say hello, give me a thumbs up, give me something, let me know you can hear me okay. Okay, we get a few messages back now. It looks like we're fine. That's great stuff. Okay, quick word to our sponsors this week. Episode 78 is sponsored by our friends at Workable. Workable are one of the best next-gen ATSs out there on the market. You should go and use Workable if you're looking to upgrade your ATS. Really have been excited to see the progress of this company. I've known their founders since for several years, actually, really when they were just maybe a 10, 15-man business or so. But they've done a fantastic job tracking the trajectory of the market, moving from SME into the enterprise world. And I'm excited to see what their next steps are going to be. Lots of interesting things happening in their product, obviously very sensitive to how the market's changing. And I think if you want a kind of when you buy an ATS, it's a big commitment. It's usually a once a company type of purchase. Once if you're head of TA, you're not going to buy multiple versions of this. One of the things you do need to keep in mind is how agile that company is in terms of iterating on product and moving forward. And I think Workable definitely are one of those businesses. Just share the link there. Check them out, workable.com. Worth you having a look. Okay, let's get on with it. Adam Gordon is in the hot seat. Great to see you back, Adam. The beard is looking magnificent. Did you shave it? I can't remember if you did or didn't, but don't shave it. It's good. Suit you. How have you been? How was your week?
It's been a great week overall. It's been a lot happening, and end of Q3 is pretty good because for most people Q2 was abysmal, Q3 was a bit better, Q4 is going to be excellent. So really looking forward to the 1st of October next week.
Yeah,
a couple of new people starting.
Have they started already? Because you've got some senior heads coming in, haven't you?
CTO started 3 weeks ago. Director of Customer Success starts on the 1st of October. She's been Global TA Director for 3 different major organizations, and so she's bringing a lot of experience.
What's she doing working with you?
Learning new things, literally. She said I could go and do another TA Director role, but to be honest, I've done it for the last 15 years, and so she wants to learn new things.
You know what? She should come on to Brainfood Live next week because we're also talking about alternative career paths for people in TA and moving into customer success from to the vendor side. Maybe one of those things. So I'd love to bring her on if she's up for it. So
I'll ask her.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, cool. That's good stuff. Let's get into quick review of last week. Recruiting Brainfood. Did you read it? And if you did, what was interesting for you, Adam?
So I found PwC report on the economic impact of people not returning to the office really interesting. So the headline was £15 billion negative impact to the UK economy based on people not spending money on goods and services such as trains and buses, but also things like cafes and restaurants, and spending money on, they're just not spending the money now.
So the hidden office support economy. So in other words, what kind of services do millions of commuters require essentially? Transportation, lunches, coffees, shoe shining, laundry services, taxis, you name it. There's an entire ecosystem built around the idea of people surging into the office in the morning and then surging out of the office back at home. So if you didn't know about this, folks, we probably should know it by now, but we're getting a lot of interesting reports. I think it's sponsored mainly by the government, but also by companies like PwC. If you shared the link, by the way, on Crowdcast there. And they're also saying, hey, listen, we need to get people not only back to work, but back in the office, because if we don't, all of these other industries are going to collapse, and that's going to have huge impact on the national economies, but also a huge impact on people essentially losing work, losing businesses. So very interesting where the analysis is. I think the question is still out as to whether it's a good thing to try and reverse time and go back to the old commute 9 to 5 type of regime. I think that's going to be a difficult case to argue. At least it's arguable given the 6 months or so we've spent in an entirely different way of working, and I believe seeing some benefits to that side of things as well.
On that, I saw a really interesting post on LinkedIn from Colin Minto, who's I think he's the EMEA TA leader for Marriott, and he said
he was actually going back, wasn't he?
Yeah, his mental health was suffering as a result of not having his time on the commute on the way into work and on the way home, and he actually had better time with his family and kids by getting home at 7:45, having the day finished, and then just getting the evening with them. And that's absolutely the opposite of the way I feel. However, everybody is different, and it's interesting the way that some people have got a different have different impacts.
I think we're going to end up having a massive crisis on this because whichever way a company goes, you're going to have a dissatisfied part of the population. It'll be a 50-50 split, more or less, I would guess, where a bunch of people are going to say, amazing, back to the office, that's great. Then you get a bunch of people who have been forced back to the office and they're not happy with it. And we might see a shakeout, people who want to stay remote maybe end up gravitating to remote only businesses. Companies that are on premise are probably looking at a big population divide here. It's like the Eloy and the Morlocks here. You know what I'm saying? It's like it can be very different.
In my company, there's like 15, 16 of us, and I think there's only 1 or 2 people who prefer to go back to the office. But we've got quite a mature workforce, so our average age in our business is going to be probably between 35 and 40. And so, that's not necessarily, reflective of most organizations. Recruitment agencies, I think, are going to have a slightly different thing. I mean, Odro is definitely a much younger company than ours, and they're like only a mile away from our office. Yeah. But their average team's probably 10 years younger than our average team. And, they're back in the office and, skateboarding around. They have to.
I'm sure Doogie's actually only 16, mate, to be honest with you.
He just turned 17.
Yeah, that's it.
Doogie's wife works in my company. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Customer success manager, candidate ready.
Amazing stuff. Doogie, keep your youthful looks, mate. All right. By the way, just a quick poll for people. Is there an age is there a generational gap where remote is better or not? Do you think that, for instance, older people I would say 50 plus, maybe they want to be remote, whatnot, commuting is like a physical strain. I'm heading towards that age. I don't need to be in the commute every day. That's a pain in the ass. But if you've got young kids, I think that's the worst thing in the world, to be at home all the time. So I think maybe that cohort of people want to go in. Maybe if you're without kids, you're 22, you want to go and have a party or whatever, you want to go in as well. Maybe if you're mid-career, you've had enough of that. I don't know. I mean, I just wonder whether there is that kind of almost generational or career maturation type of categorization you can get. Anyway, let's speculate that at another time. What else is interesting last week, Adam?
Well, I really enjoyed the network liquidity map and the difference between why synchronous networks are kind of on the demise a little bit. So synchronous networks are those sorts of social networks where you have to be live with the other person to have an interaction. An example would be house party.
Right.
And, it's just too difficult to get everybody together at the same time. However, I have got an example of where that's not the case, and that's if you think about gaming. There's a lot of people play mass multiplayer games are on playing the whole time, and I would describe that as a synchronous network. But in terms of social networks or communities, the asynchronous network is definitely striving ahead and becoming, what people want, where they can go on in their own time, they can reply to things in their own time, and that's more beneficial to community builders.
You know what? We're in the on-demand world. Once you've had on-demand, there's no way you're going to get rid of it. Show me a person that has used Spotify and then decided to go out and buy CDs. You know what I mean? It doesn't work. So I think with communities, it's exactly the same. It's like once you realize that, yes, you can get some community value, but you don't have to be on all the time, or you don't have to get lucky to be on at the same time as your mates. And then that's going to work very well. I've just shared the link to that post into the Crowdcast chat stream. Very much worth checking out. A little bit technical, I thought, but it's accessible enough. But it introduces this concept of synchronicity versus asynchronicity, which I think is really important for community builders. Because one of the things I think community builders do struggle with, and I'm part of zillions of communities, some work, some don't, but you can tell the ones that don't work are the ones that struggle with getting everyone there at the same time. There's literally not enough, there's not enough people, liquidity, there's not enough people in the group for you to ever have enough people on at the same time. So you never get the spontaneous chats. It's like running a 24-hour pub where, the 2 or 3 people turn up every hour. It's not much fun. It's much better having a 1-hour opening and then everyone turn up at the same time.
Happy hour.
Obviously pre-COVID, right? And forget the pandemic side. By the way, this is why pubs are going to absolutely get crushed as well with all of this, restraining numbers of people in, etc. The entire idea is to get everyone in together. So, yeah, we're going to have to reinvent a lot of things. Okay, well, one more, Adam, before we get on and bring on our 2 amazing guests.
Okay, I had 4, so if it's going to be one, then I have to choose Adrian Kolf's article about the power of automation in sourcing and recruitment.
Yes.
Really great article, explains clearly the advantages of automation in speed to make things happen, productivity for recruiters, all that sort of thing. He included a few downsides, which, to be honest, I think he was scraping the bottom of the barrel a little bit, because I didn't think they were particularly downsides. I didn't quite agree with those, but certainly all the benefits I agreed with. I went through the end-to-end recruitment process of a FTSE 100 company over the last 2 weeks, 72 steps, and I counted certainly over 50 of them that can be automated based on technologies I'm aware of.
Yep.
So the other 22 might be able to as well, I'm not sure, but certainly 50 of the 72 could be.
That's amazing. You know what? They are so. I think Social Talent have done something similar, where they've broken down the job of recruiting into micro tasks, and they've just analysed how many micro tasks they actually are involved in getting a single requisition, and it is into the 70 to 100 type of mark. A lot of the times we do these without conscious thought, but we don't realise that these are all things that take time and effort. And they're fairly mechanical. They don't require a huge amount of cognitive energy. So Adrian has actually done a great job of publishing really good blogs. So he's a founder of a recruiting company, and usually you don't find founders having the time to put this in, but I think he's got a really modern way of business development, modern way of branding his company, and he does a great job with blogs of this type, which are super high value. And I've put a few of them into Brainfood, and of course that goes to 20,000 people, so I'm sure he gets a decent amount of lead gen from that. He's not paid anything to do that, by the way. Just want to let you know, though, it is a way to get you some business, and if you add value, simple as that. Add valuable stuff into the marketplace, and people might end up rewarding you on that. So check out that post. Check out Adrian Kolf. Okay, cool. Let's talk about where this topic. We are talking about. Oh, sorry, everybody. If you want to ask a question to our guests, by the way, use the Ask a Question feature at the bottom of the screen there. We'll get to those at the end of the show. Quick one before we bring on Sarah and Kevin. I wanted to do a recruiting trends kind of forecast for the next 12 months. And before I bring our two guests on, I wanted to ask you actually, Adam, some basic forecasts. What do you see happening 12 months? I'm not talking about 5 years, whatever. 12 months time. Where do you see the recruiting marketplace? What's going to truly be an embedded change, I guess, from next year or so?
So downward pressure from CFOs in every single business for every single department in a company to do more with less has a big impact on recruitment, and almost every recruitment team I know has less people than it did 6 months ago, and they're all looking for different ways of doing things. So I was with a TA director, customer of mine yesterday, who told me that they've got rid of intake meetings or rec meetings with hiring managers, because a lot of them are repetitive, and the recruitment team knows what they're doing. So they're only doing rec meetings, like kickoff meetings, if it's a brand new job they haven't hired for before, or there's some nuance about it that the hiring manager wants to talk about. So doing more with less, I think, remains the theme of the day right now.
Yep.
And some of that's about process, some of it's about technology. And the one other thing I want to talk about really quickly is segmentation of recruitment team responsibilities has accelerated. So the shift from 360-degree recruiters to people who have got a responsibility for talent attraction, which might be sourcing and recruitment marketing, or splitting up those two things as well, and the rise of talent ops or recruitment ops this year has accelerated as a result of COVID, no doubt.
Yeah, very interesting. So super interesting stuff. But let's bring on Kevin and Sarah here. Let's get some proper brains on. No disrespect, Adam. Bring on some proper brains on here, and we'll see whether what their views are on the wider market, because they've got a much wider view than the narrow scope that we tend to look at. Let's have a look at the world at large, HR at large, and see where we go. Can I see Kevin? Oh. Well, there is a Kevin. I assume that's Kevin Wheeler. But if it's not, Kevin, you're on. Let's bring him on. I love when people...
I so hope this is a different Kevin.
So do I. There she is, Sarah.
We've got the right Sarah.
Great to see you, Sarah. And that's an enormous mug of coffee there, I think.
Tea. So, it's not as big as it seems, but...
Well, you've gone British for the British show, the British-based show.
I missed all of my travel, so I've had to switch over to English breakfast tea every day.
Good stuff. Sarah, for the people who don't know you, I wonder whether you can quickly introduce yourself, what it is that you do, and just tell the audience.
Sure. My name is Sarah Brennan. I'm actually a former practitioner that transitioned over into really researching and trying to change recruiting and recruiting technology from behind the scenes. And so for the last 9 years, I have been the CEO of a company called Accelerant, which did research and reports and studied what people were looking for. And as of October 15th, I will actually be CEO of a new company called Aspect 43. So we're going to be doing something. Actually, this is the first announcement of it. So we're doing something totally different in the marketplace, where we are going to allow recruiters, TA professionals, as well as HR and other areas to actually have a voice and impact vendor roadmaps, content distribution, all of these things in a way that we've never done before. And
Very
so it's going to be pretty cool, and really some exciting stuff that we're doing. We've got Molly Lombardi is coming in as a partner on more of the kind of core and HR side of things. And we've got a great team that will be launching with us.
That sounds amazing. Well, I'm very honored that you chose Brainfood Live to break this stunning news, Sarah. So this is one of the accolades we'll have to sort of stick on the website at some point. So that's exciting, and we really look forward to seeing.
Yeah, well, you guys have a great group of people, and I think would be, a lot of them have great ideas and want to make massive changes in the type of technology that's happening. And we need to do that beyond a handful of kind of influencers right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's going to help make better products as well. At the end of the day, that's
100%.
And founders will want that as well. So that's fantastic.
Yes.
Kevin, I see Kevin's arrived. Kevin, how are you doing, sir? Really good to see you. You look as if you're actually, no, it's just your chair. I thought you were wearing like a big coat, and I thought this guy's really cool. I don't know, hang on. He's in California. I thought that was on fire. So why is he? Anyway, Kevin, great to have you on the show. And I can't imagine anybody here not knowing you. But for the people, just for the ritual of it, can you just quickly introduce yourself, who you are and what it is you do?
Sure. I run the Future of Talent Institute, and we've been a think tank basically that looks at the future of work, recruiting, learning, as many related areas around those things as we can. And we kind of try to track where it's heading, what the trends are, and what the future looks like.
Fantastic. And great to have you on the show, Kevin. So let's just dive right into it. I asked sort of Adam sort of just lay out the framework for this, but I'm kind of looking 12 months out, right? We're not looking 5 years down the line. We're not looking at anything super long term. Coming at the end of this quarter, I think everyone's kind of tooling up for what's happening 2021. Is it going to be some sort of recovery? What does the recovery mean for recruiting? What are the embedded changes that we're likely to carry on as we go forward? So I just wanted to maybe go to you with this one first, Sarah. If there's one thing that you could put your house on, what would you say has been a change that's occurred over the last 9 months or so that you think is going to be fairly persistent going forward?
That we're not going back in the office.
So remote
I think we're going to be staying remote at least. We have talked to a number of very large companies that have not publicly announced it, but have let all of their employees know that they should plan to be remote at least through September of 2021. Most of the conferences we've already gotten notifications from that I was booked to speak at have canceled for 2021. I think we are at least a full year out. So if we're looking 12 months out, remote and figuring out how that we can attract, hire, and onboard a remote workforce is going to really be key over the next 12 months, because hiring is not going to stop. The economy is not going to get a lot better. It's probably going to get a little bit worse, but that doesn't mean things aren't going to stop happening.
Yeah, that's really emphatic. And it's interesting. We've seen, I don't know whether it's the same in the US, but in the UK, we've seen some very clear government messaging to say, you need to go back to the office, particularly for concern for the wider economic impact of not doing so, meaning the office support economy, the folks that serve the sandwiches, the people that run the coffee shops, and the shoe shine people, the laundry people, even sanitation, rubbish disposal, stuff like that. Suddenly all of that the streets are super clean right now because there's not millions of people going in and out. So the government is super concerned. I wanted to explore here, companies say, let's go remote, but do you think there'll be artificial pressure from the states and the government to say, you know what, there's a wider picture here, you need to go back in? Kevin, let's go to you with this one. Presuming that companies are going to sort of stick with the remote first option.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I totally agree with Sarah. They're going to stay remote. I think that, companies like Twitter and Facebook have already announced. Nobody's ever going to go back, they said. Facebook has announced half the workforce will remain virtual permanently. So, it's clearly a trend. it's really interesting when you ask about the governments. I don't think they can coerce unless you live in a dictatorship. I think companies are very independent, and they're going to make their own decisions about whether or not people go back to work or not, despite what the governments say. And I think that a lot of the governments are putting pressure on companies to get people physically back at work. The economist at Berkeley calculated a few years ago that for every person hired, there are 5 support workers out there in the economy. So,
right.
Yeah. So the impact that you were talking about a few minutes ago is huge. Right? It's absolutely huge. And you go to San Francisco today, and it's like a ghost town. I mean, it's really scary to even walk down the streets. So imagine this continuing, for the next couple of years. Governments are really upset. The tax revenue from buildings, office buildings, is going to decrease. Cities are going to be in fiscal crisis. So of course they're going to encourage people to go back to work, no matter what. They really have no financial choice but to do that.
Don't they have some instruments though? I mean, again, I think different countries, different cities, different states might have different tools. But for instance, in the UK, the government is providing payment support, paying half the wages, a third of the wages for staff. I think the UK government's going to say, look, we'll pay that, but if you're remote, we're not going to pay it. And then it will cascade the pressure down to a CEO to say, hey, we need to get half the salary paid. You need to come back into the office. So I think the government has tools there. I just wonder whether you anticipate the governments are like going that far. I'll throw this open to you as well, Sarah. What are your thoughts, you two?
I don't think that would be the case here. We don't have that. There was a small period of time where people that were unemployed were getting a $600 extra a week bonus. But for most now, there's nothing, or there's just the standard, which is about $200 a week to live on.
Right.
And that's if you're kind of in the middle range. And so the governments aren't really providing anything. We are so litigious in the United States also that if somebody does get sick at work, that company is putting themselves and their shareholders from a legal liability perspective of getting sued. And if somebody else is getting sick, then there's a lot of other liability from that perspective. And we are getting pressured, I would say. And there's a push, open up. I mean, our kids are back in school. We've had teachers pass away already. We've had kids that are getting sick and getting hospitalized. But there's still this pressure, like open up, and we need football, like all of these type of things. And so we are getting the pressure, but I think most organizations, unless they are really essential, are kind of trying to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. And quite honestly, it's much cheaper for a business to run fully remote than have 100,000, 200,000 square feet of office space in San Francisco where people can barely afford to live.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's obvious now, isn't it? Especially if you go with your figures there, Sarah, people are going to, push it back to September 2021. By then, you've got 18 months worth of learning how to do this. Yeah. You've set up processes, you've set up systems, you've even got habits built in. You're not going to phase shift back if you wanted to, unless you've been coerced to do so. So. Right. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Adam, I'll go to you actually, representing the UK. What do you think the government's going to do here? I personally think the government's going to really crack down and say, go back to the office.
They said the opposite yesterday. So Boris's speech yesterday said, don't go to work. Work from home if you can, which is the direct opposite. Yes, this is yesterday or the day before. In the last 48 hours, he said the exact opposite of what he said 3 weeks ago. So I don't know. The message in Scotland is different. Incidentally, we have a much more convincing leader in Scotland, and who just says exactly what to do, and everybody knows what to do. So there's a leadership and communications problem in the UK.
I tell you, there's another thing you've introduced, because the political leadership will probably have a huge impact on what the CEOs of businesses do. Because if there's like this radical inconsistency that we've been getting in England, let's say, where it's 1 minute this, 1 minute that, like how can you organize a business like that if you've just, told all your employees you have to come into the office and then you're saying you can't? What can you do? You can't run a business like that. So, yeah, very interesting. Okay, let's move on.
I just want to say there is a. This is going to sound really heartless, but there is a Darwinian aspect to this. there's a lot of things that were happening in the world which have been accelerated considerably. So, such as the move to e-commerce, and like it was going to happen anyway. So the move to e-commerce is one example. The work from home was becoming a trend anyway. So there's a lot of trends which have just accelerated. So what's the, for things like that, is that a big problem?
Okay, so I think that's true. Let's move on to another impact on recruiting, or a forecast on recruiting. Advertising for jobs. I've lost count of the numbers of people that have told me, Hung, I'm not advertising for this because I'm terrified of being deluged from desperate job candidates applying for this job. I can't process. Like previously they were dealing with 50, 60 applications. Now they're talking about several hundreds, even thousands of people applying. You can't process that. So what do you think is the next 12 months looking like for recruitment advertising? Do companies pull back from it and say, look, we're just going to hunt because it's easy to do so. We can't afford to put an ad out. Or do you think, you know what, they're going to do it anyway and just have improved filtration mechanisms? Kevin, let's go to you on that one.
Well, I think automation and filtration is huge. I mean, I think you're going to see there'll probably be some decline in job advertising. I think that's inevitable, given the fact that there's so many candidates looking for work, so there's no need to advertise. But at the same time, whether you advertise or not, you're probably going to get deluged if you're a known company. In fact, I'm working with clients right now that are facing that. So they're using things like chatbots and other front-end tools to help screen candidates or redirect them to the right positions. So you're going to see a vast increase, I think, in the automation of recruitment. And, I've written a lot about this, and I've seen it happening everywhere I go now. Every client I'm working with is figuring out how do we automate more and where do we automate effectively, and what's the future role of a recruiter going to be if we can automate a lot of these things. And I think Adam mentioned earlier the number 70. One of my clients just counted 76 steps to hire somebody in their recruiting process. So out of those 76 steps, they're going through a lean process right now, and they're probably going to be able to eliminate or automate well over half of those steps. And a combination of elimination and automation is really going to change what recruiters do, what they're expected. And so I think, go ahead, Adam.
Sorry, Kevin. I just wanted to add to that. The thing is that like filtration and chatbots and things like that, a lot of people are nervous about this because they think, it involves artificial intelligence and, I'm not sure I understand all of this. It doesn't. You just use forms. There's loads of basic things you can do that doesn't involve any massive step into the unknown of, the future.
It's mainly rule-based,
I think it's also really important for people that might be newer to recruiting and recruiting tech to understand historically how applicant tracking systems even came to be and got to be where we are was really out of the after effects and the recession following September 11th. And so it was really after that we started seeing really high numbers of resumes and everything else coming in. And it was the first time that mid-market companies under 10,000 employees, under 5,000 employees started bringing in even an applicant tracking system. Before that, everything was done manually or done purely from the job board, from Monster primarily at that point in time. And so it was 2003 to 2005 where the after effects of what had happened really helped speed and accelerate the adoption of applicant tracking systems in the very first place. And so what we're going to see right now because of this is we might see a cutback on job ads across the board. But I think from a technical perspective and a technology perspective, what we're going to more so see is an acceleration in some of the other technologies. And sometimes that acceleration takes 24, 36 months for true adoption to come in. But that's what's going to happen. It's not only going to speed up the adoption side of it, but also the development, which is why, from our perspective of what we're doing, the education piece is going to be so key and so important because I think, like you were saying, a lot of people don't realize most of the stuff doesn't have AI and doesn't have to have AI. It just has to be process automation. And there was a time where a lot of the marketers were afraid to use the term process automation. But I think one of the big technologies, quite honestly, if we're talking 12 months out, that's going to happen is being able to actually search and source out of your own database. We've already spent millions upon millions and millions and millions to attract talent inside our own ATS. And quite honestly, most companies are just not even looking at that first. And that's partial education. It's partial retraining because we didn't have to. And it's going to be partial strategic because as unemployment rates actually go up, it becomes much harder to find and recruit good candidates.
Yeah, I think that's going to go ahead, Kevin.
I think you're going to see the smaller companies adopting a lot of these tools faster than the large companies, because the large companies have so much entrenched bureaucracy and so much entrenched practices that they have to change that it becomes a bureaucratic nightmare. I mean, like, I'm working with large clients right now, and changing one thing takes 10 people to approve it.
Yeah.
So if you're working with a small organization, they're going to be able to change on a dime. They're just going to be able to change really quickly and adopt the tools and technologies that are out there. And AI is it's snake oil mostly, because mainly what we're doing is using rule-based decision making trees. That's 80% of it, and it looks like magic, but it's not. And so incorporating these tools is really more of a process challenge than it is an intellectual challenge, right? It's how do we incorporate this into our process? How do we get the person who used to do this be okay with not doing it anymore? Those are the real challenges. They're the people challenges as much as anything. Just overcoming the internal inertia, which is why I think you're going to see small companies really adopting this stuff quickly and giving them a real competitive edge over some of the larger ones.
And this actually leads to sort of the other side of this, which is the candidate experience should be improved with greater automation, even though that some people might feel like counterintuitive because they've got a, in my view, slightly over-romanticized view of the human experience, right? But if you think about your dealings with the recruiter, it's not always necessarily the most pleasant thing ever. I mean, let's face facts. So what candidates really want is elimination of ambiguity. For instance, if I've applied for a job, I want to know whether I'm still in play. And if I've interviewed, if I'm in process, I would like to know where in the process I am. I don't mind so much if I'm actually not going to make it, because I'm mature enough. I think most people are mature enough to recognize they're not going to be a surefire hit for every job. But what they can't handle, and no, it's unfair for them to handle, is this. Now you see it, now you don't opportunity, because they've got some emotional commitment that way, and they want to know whether they want to commit more energy to that opportunity or switch to something else, because times are tough. They can't be wasting time. So I think that automation should translate into better candidate experience. Yes or no? What do you think, guys?
100%.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't want to talk to anybody.
Yeah.
When I go to the grocery store, I want to go through the self-checkout line. I want to scan my own stuff, bag my own stuff, and just get out, right? I think just in general, I order my food, it gets delivered, it gets dropped off, right? Like, we are shifting. And so high touch to me, if I'm interviewing and I'm actually in a process, yes, I want to have those conversations. I want to be going through all of that. Otherwise, make it simple and easy. Like, it should not be harder because you want to feel good about yourself as a recruiter.
Yeah,
or what you're doing.
It's true that I
nothing can be worse than the current experience.
Sorry, Kevin, can you repeat? Maybe I'm the only person that didn't hear. Don't worry.
I'm sorry. I'm just saying nothing can be worse than the current experience that most candidates go through.
Right.
Not possible.
100%. I mean, I have these arguments all the time. I'm a big fan of even extreme examples of automation, which people have a problem with, like robot interviews and stuff. I think, yeah, let's bring it on, no problem. Because I want to press the point that actually a human interviewer is sometimes a very bad experience. I've been a candidate, I've been interviewed. It's not necessarily great. It can be very problematic. So let's see that happening. Let's bring it to the next point.
Sorry, Han, can I just add to that? The automation workflow doesn't forget to call the candidate back. No. The automation workflow doesn't forget to give the candidate some feedback. The automation workflow doesn't cause the problems. It's humans that cause most of the problems in recruitment.
automation workflow doesn't have bad days. It doesn't have the bias that we have because somebody looks like the girl we didn't like in high school. Like the things that impact interviews and we pretend don't from very early on, and the number of people that don't ever make it past that first interview because of whatever it is. It's a very nice fairy tale to believe that humans are actually better at it than they are.
That said, the automation workflow cannot solve the candidate's last-minute objection handling.
No.
The automation workflow cannot convince that skeptical LinkedIn member who's never heard of your company and doesn't care about your company and isn't interested in a job move. They can't convince you to turn up for an interview 24 hours later.
Right, so time out. So right now, you can see straight away that we might need to divide the candidate from the applicant as conceptual here. So if an applicant, meaning this individual, wants into your job, you can actually present that person with a fairly automated experience because really they're just going to want to get through this as quickly and as efficiently and as unambiguously as possible, and then move on. However, if you're headhunting a candidate and you're trying to convert them into someone who's going to be potentially a prospect for you, you can't do that with automation. And maybe that's the conceptual thing we need to have in our minds when we kind of sit on this argument as to whether automation is good or bad. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you can do with what you can't do with technology is what Adam said: overcome objections, convince a candidate, sell a candidate on a position, sell a hiring manager on a candidate. Those things technology will never be able to do. That's where people are going to play an important part. That's why this term, I think, talent advisor is cropping up today. About the recruiters are going to become talent advisors, which really means they're going to become people who do what I just said. They're going to be the ones that really interface with the candidate and the hiring manager in a personal way. The rest of it can all be done with technology.
All right, let's dive a little bit deeper on that then, Kevin, because we're talking about the recruiter shifting their responsibilities. Let's say there's 76 things, 150 things that currently a recruiter might be doing. Automation, pressured by COVID-19 and this shift to remote, will automate 50% of that. Where else is the focus of this person going to be? Is it going to be less on sourcing, less on acquisition, let's say, more on assessment, more on the offer handling piece? Where do you see all of this happening? It seems to me that they're going to move further down from the top of the funnel, right? They're going to move further away from the front of it.
My real opinion is we need to give more authority and expect more out of hiring managers. They have to make judgments and decisions that we're now pawning off on recruiters. And I don't think recruiters are generally qualified to do that. It requires judgment. It requires understanding your team and the work you've got to have them do. And, when I interview hiring managers and their complaint about recruiters and sourcing is, they have all the qualifications, but they didn't really understand my job and what I really was looking for. Yeah. So, I mean, I think the bottom line is we need to spend, maybe recruiters become people who counsel, coach, and advise hiring managers, who give them the skills that they need to do a better job of what they're doing, as well as sort of overcoming objections and selling and doing all those other things. So it's really becomes more of an influencing job, a sales job, and a training job. Right now, it's basically a clerical job.
I think there's also a difference between the different types of hiring. And so I think there are going to be recruiter roles that are filling high turnover, high volume hiring that are maybe not as unique and specific, where, call centers, hospitality, some of these other types of roles will continue to be hired actually directly and primarily by a recruiter type of role. And the rest, I agree 100%. I mean, the hiring decisions, quite honestly, coming from a hiring manager always, in my mind, have made better sense because there's so much nuance in a role. I can tell you in the last year, at least 5 people that I know that have gone in and been hired by organizations that were declined by the initial recruiter because they didn't fit. Well, they didn't really understand, they were looking word. This doesn't match. Well, it was exactly what the hiring manager went for. Luckily, these people just went around HR, went directly to a CEO, they went directly to a VP, they went directly to that, and were hired in and are doing incredibly successful. I could think of examples of this every single year that I know of. And so I think that there's a little bit of there's going to be almost a shift in the different types of recruiters and their role, depending on, white collar or more professional type of roles versus kind of high volume, high turnover type of roles.
That's a really interesting angle, Sarah. And actually, yeah, of course you can, Kevin. Go ahead.
I just want to push back a bit. I think those low-end jobs are either going to be completely automated and eliminated, or they're going to be filled with technology. I don't think recruiters are going to be filling those low-end jobs. If they exist at all, they're going to be filled with automated tools that will select you, assess you.
Have to run that, right? And so it might end up being that it's more like a coordinator type of role that's filling those type of things. There is still going to be somebody that's doing some portion of the process and kind of overseeing. So they might be doing 100 a week, but they're going to be doing something to kind of oversee that versus kind of more of what a talent advisor would.
They become a process manager and a tech manager, though. I don't think they're interviewing candidates. I don't think they have any one-to-one contact with candidates. No, at the exec level, I'm not sure an awful lot changes. And sort of 200-300K salaries up, I'm not sure a lot changes. I think that remains with exec search people, whether that's external or internal. I don't think that becomes an automated process.
Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
I was going to say, there's already technology. I went in with a company and we actually built from scratch an ATS that was because of their special hiring needs, which was exactly that. They needed to be able to completely automate hiring because they were doing really large scale, massive volumes of hiring. And it just needed to go, and how they did it, basically it was first come, first serve. If you met the requirements, you met the needs, you automatically got an offer sent out to you. You went to that because they knew people were going to be high turnover. The time that they were going to stay on the job wasn't going to improve because somebody did something a little bit more of a touch point. It was just the type of workforce they were hiring and doing. And while there isn't really solutions and technology that exist on kind of the market, I know there's at least 3 products that are being used that have been built in-house that are doing exactly that already.
Can I just say one thing on this? I've just shared the Larder Recruiting Brainfood. Have a look for Amazon and automation right there, because there was a story a couple of weeks ago in the newsletter about a guy, I think he was a journalist, that experimented by applying for a job. So he's one of these fake candidates. Yeah. But he did it in order to prove the efficacy of a completely non-human process. So he managed to go through the entire process, passed the assessments, got the contract, got the job, and was just instructed to turn up. And at no point did he have any interaction with a human being. And he came back with kind of an ambiguous view. He wasn't sure whether this is a good or bad thing. And at the end of the day, I'm just thinking it's probably a good thing, man. I mean, you got it fast. I mean, ultimately, it was a warehousing job. It wasn't necessarily a career per se, or it wasn't something that, you would identify as something that it was a transactional move by the candidate. It was like a quick, I want to supply labor for this amount of money for this period of time. And it was very transactional from both sides. So it seems to me like this has got to be the way forward for that type of role. And as you said, Adam, exec search have been sitting there like since the dinosaur era. They're going to stay sitting pretty, doing a very high touch, human intensive recruiting.
On the Amazon example, I'm not sure if that was an in-house built solution, but certainly kudos to Tim Meehan from Pontoon Solutions, because he runs the innovation lab there, and they created a recruiterless solution for Amazon in Germany and a couple of other countries. And I'm not sure if that was the same one that guy went through or not, but Amazon's got, it works. It absolutely works.
So on this note, we're talking about automation. We're talking about it looks like less recruiters, doesn't it? I mean, we're talking about, an industry. I don't know how many recruiters are on the planet. Maybe 2 million, I think. I forget who did the search on LinkedIn for a recruiter job title. Probably more than 2 million. If they can come up with English language as a recruiter for 2 million, if you imagine all the other people that aren't using English language to describe themselves and not on LinkedIn, there's probably 5 million people doing the job.
All the ninjas.
Yeah, exactly. not English.
Just look at it this way. If the profession of recruiting has only been around for about 70 years. Before that, hiring managers pretty much hired their own people. Henry Ford used to go out in the streets and say, you, and you, and they'd come to work the next day, okay? So recruiting came about basically during the World Wars, World War I and World War II. And that was sort of the beginning of HR and recruiting. And so recruiting was a clerical job. It was basically making sure we get the people on the payroll, make sure they get whatever benefits they're supposed to have, make sure we're compliant with whatever laws exist. It was a very mechanical job. And, I think we've tried to take this profession and make it into, a super high level job. And for executive recruiting and the senior level type things, yeah, that's probably necessary, and to Adam's point, will stay around forever. But at the bottom end, I think we can automate a good portion of it, if not all of it, and return more responsibility over to hiring managers. I mean, if you run a restaurant or a flower shop or a hair salon, you don't have a recruiter. You put a sign in the window and you interview people and you hire them. You make a decision. So, why do we do it in a company? Just because of volume or practice or habit? But, you really think about it logically. And if you're a small company, you can probably find most of your people through referrals or your network. And you sit down, and you talk to them, and you hire them. And you really don't need a lot of the infrastructure and administrivia that we've put in place.
And to be honest,
a lot of that's been complicated by government.
That goes beyond even recruiting. I think that's going to be true as we're looking and researching HR across the board. There's a lot of HR activities and roles that we've tried to kind of elevate. And there's nothing wrong with a job not being at an executive level in an organization. There's nothing wrong with that. So it's not necessarily a negative thing that the kind of reality is setting in a lot of companies, but across the board, for HR and recruiting, and quite honestly, likely in sales and customer success, and in a lot of other areas, marketing, we're bringing automation in, and it's the people that are going to be willing to adapt to the technology that are going to be the ones that have longer term careers. What does that do for diverse hiring? Well, you're still, can you clarify that question and dive in a little bit?
I want to answer that, but I don't quite understand what the question is about.
Because there's like 3 different directions I could say to that, but I don't know what their goal is here.
Yeah.
But, I agree with you, Kevin, 100%. I think we've kind of made, a few years ago, there was this push like, well, recruiters should report directly to the CEO, like not even part of HR. And, it is vital and is important, but at the same time, we have to understand its order in a business. And sometimes we forget how all of this, most recruiters don't even take accountability for the impact on quality, longevity, or anything else of the people that they're hiring. They're not reporting those metrics. They're not funneling up like other organization departments have to.
Can I just add one thing to this, because I think that Sarah's point is really important. And one thing that I've noticed in the last 12 months is that a lot of TA organizations are really understanding the difference between hiring in-demand talent and hiring what would be the opposite volume, I guess. So in-demand talent being those areas where there are more jobs than there are people with the skills to do the jobs. That is a completely different way of doing recruitment compared to advertising, selecting, and then getting the job filled. And I can see that talent acquisition or recruitment is taking definitely a higher prominent position in organizations that are primarily in-demand talent organizations, like in technology, scientific businesses, things like that, than they are in the kind of maybe retail companies and things where actually it's much more of an advertising play and there are more people than there are jobs. That's a big split in the way you do recruitment.
100%.
Yeah.
Okay, I need to say something here. Kevin, I got to interrupt you, I'm afraid to say. I just want to push back a little bit on this kind of narrative that we've constructed, which I've got a huge amount of sympathy with. But I know there's a bunch of people watching this and thinking, why aren't you saying something defending the recruiting industry? So I want to do that. I want to say, okay, firstly, there's a fellow here, maybe a lady, I can't quite, it's a 3-letter name. What about diversity hiring? I mean, that is a primary concern for a lot of CEOs right now. That's cascaded throughout the entire business. We need to diversify our workforce. We cannot rely on hiring managers to do that, because guess what? They're going to hire exactly as they look at the person that looks similar to them in the mirror. And most hiring managers, like it or not, are coming from a certain demographic, which means that you're not going to get that diversity that you're looking for. And it's in fact a self-reinforcing mechanism that you do this. I'm getting some well-out rejections for my assertion. Let's go to Sarah with this one. Why am I incorrect?
Because it's no different than recruiters doing the same thing. In fact, a lot of what we have found is that the hiring managers actually end up hiring more diverse teams than the recruiters do. And there's been some research done by LinkedIn actually around recruiter bias a couple years ago that was incredibly shocking. And so I think one of the things that, just to clarify, is that it was like if you're pulling from the network, you're going to hire, if you hire people that are only in your network, one of the best ways to have a diverse candidate pool is to have a diverse organization where people feel welcomed and they feel included. And so it doesn't matter how good you are at recruiting in a diversity inclusion settings, if they come in to the organization and don't feel welcomed and they don't feel like they belong, because then you're going to have high turnover. And so it's not necessarily their personal network, but they're looking at people that have already applied. They're looking at, they're doing the job ads. They're also creating an environment and a culture. I know that's kind of a iffy word right now, but they're creating an environment and culture that truly is inclusive, welcoming, and belonging. And there's enough technology and tools where we could go in and ensure right now, and this goes past a little bit the recruiting side of it, but within business, and recruiters should be pushing on their HR teams to ensure this is happening. There's a way that they could actually go through and do salary evaluations really quickly to make sure that there's no racial disparity, there's no age disparity, that there's no gender disparity and all of that, because that's a really strong recruiting point. There's ways that you could go in and look at teams and identify what managers are doing. I mean, we have to start using data analytics in a much more strategic way with regards to our talent, and not just reporting after the fact, but identifying, spotting trends and spotting gaps in those things to really have true diversity inclusion in business.
Okay. And we're going to have to move on from this topic. I think we can keep going. Thank you so much for the contribution in the chat stream there. One more question in defense of the recruiter, because it looks like a dystopic vision that we've constructed here. What about the alternative workforce? I think we're all focusing on this idea of, permanent hiring. Of course, that's going to reduce, therefore recruiters will shrink. What about the person who's going to be looking at gig workers and activating platforms and thinking about freelancer resource and thinking about those types of folks? Are we saying the hiring manager needs to do all of that? Or is there going to be some sort of function? I think Josh Bersin is of this view, where essentially the recruiter stops becoming a talent acquisition person, but they become like a talent access person. They're the person that's there saying, hey, listen, to the business, if you need skills, I'm here to give you those skills, but I'm also here to advise you as to whether it's a full-time employee or whether we need to develop, get a partner in there, or whether it's an offshore solution, or whether we activate a gig platform to solve this problem. Isn't that a future pathway for the recruitment? Maybe we need to change our name, but is that a pathway for that function? Kevin?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's a great point. I think that you could create a position that created, maybe a portal where here's hiring managers can go to this place to look for talent, find talent, whether it's gig or permanent or whatever it is. I think you're going to see this merger in our thinking between that remote workforce, the gig workforce, and the permanent workforce. I think you're going to see those barriers sort of, maybe not in the next 12 months, but in the next 2 or 3 years, those are going to kind of disappear. as important demarcations. And so, in that case, there's going to be a need for how do those people all funnel in.
Yeah, the reason why I disagree is simply because I think governments are going to step in. I think we're going to go to an era of statism like we haven't seen for like a long time. They're going to step in. They're going to say, nope, that's not happening. Banned. And I think we've seen, for instance, in California, straight away, Uber had to leave. That kind of experience, I think, will start rolling out. But that's a topic for another time. The intrusion of government into the free market, because I think that may be a round two for us. There are 5 questions, folks, that people have asked in the thing, so we need to go to them straight away. We're running short on time. I'm just going to go straight to these questions here. We have got a question from Ben. Ben is asking, what do you think is going to happen to passive job seekers in 2021? Will they disappear as they appreciate their current company more, where they survived the pandemic and now don't have to go to the office with their bad boss? So in other words, this idea of, everyone's kind of looking, is that now removed from the game in 2021? Let's go to you with this one, Sarah.
I think historically that is what we have seen. Especially with really good candidates, it's a lot harder to even actively and source and recruit them out of an organization, even for a perfect fit, because they don't know how stable the other company that you're trying to move them into is. And so even if things are really bad, as long as they know they will have a job, they will often stay. And so that is where kind of that more personal side of recruiting and the automation isn't going to work if you're actually trying to convince and truly recruit somebody out. And now on the flip side, they might know something might happen, or if they feel uneasy at all, it will become a little bit easier to potentially recruit them out.
Well, I think that's just definitely the answer right there. The answer is yes. Basically, the passive job seeker is gone in 2021. Okay, thank you, Sarah.
I don't agree with that at all.
Well, it doesn't matter. We've got to move on. Right, next question. Sorry, Adam. Why do
I made my point.
Why do we have to replace recruiters with automation, and why don't focus instead on hiring better recruiters rather than focusing on automation? This is from Stefania. Let's go to you with that, Kevin. Why don't we just get better recruiters? Forget about trying to roboticize everything. Better recruiters is the answer. What's your view on that?
2 simple answers. They're expensive and they get sick and take time off and don't always do the job consistently. Very simple.
Right, so there you go. It costs more and it's higher risk. That's as simple as that from a business point of view. Okay.
And it doesn't provide more value to the business. There's no positive ROI.
Okay, we've got one from Andres Molina saying, where can you read the PwC report? You can read it in the chat stream, or you can go to the larder.recruitingbrainfood.com. Just search for it there. In fact, you should have signed up for the newsletter. You would have got it in your inbox anyway, sir. So make sure you do that. Okay, final question here. This one from Kevin. I think this is, I'm not going to, maybe Sicily or something like that. The question is for Kevin. If companies going to be hiring for, sorry, we've already answered this question. I do beg your pardon. We've talked about diversity. We can't answer that one. We've already dealt with it. Okay, that's it. Let's leave a few final words because we're kind of short on time here, folks. Let's have a think. Next 12 months, we already said what are the embedded things that are going to happen. What is the sort of thing that has happened so far that you think will disappear? Like the change that has happened in 2020 that you think it's episodic, it's not persistent. We're going to go back to where we were before in 2021. So Sarah, let's go to you with this one first.
Oh, I have to go first. I think we are actually likely going to cut back on all of the branding stuff. I think branding and employment branding is probably going to merge more into the consumer brand and just be part of something overall, partially because of cost and partially because the consumer experience with companies is being so heavily impacted by the employment brand and what is happening within their workforce. And so while it's not going to technically fully go away, I guess, I do think that there's going to be a big merge of how it is managed. And we're already starting to see that within some larger organizations.
Lee, I tell you, Lee Candiotti, nothing will stay the same. One thing will stay the same, sir. That is Lee Candiotti's amazing contributions on the chat stream. You keep going, my friend. Okay, Kevin, let's go to you with this one. The question is basically, what is an episodic change that's happened this year that you think will revert in 2021? Let's rephrase it that way. So in other words, it's going to go back in some way.
Well, I think the remote working, and I think we will continue to work remotely to a large degree, but I think we're going to see a hybrid model emerge where you're going to see a much more thoughtful approach to why something is remote and why it has to be physically together. I think you're going to see a lot of teamwork and social things need to happen in person, but they may not be at the workplace. They may take place in coffee shops or somewhere else. But we're going to see a whole new structure of people actually working physically together, but in a very different way. And so I think our digital belief that remote, all physical is not a correct view. I think we're going to go back to something somewhere in the middle, a mixed hybrid model. And I think that will be the future.
I'm going to disagree with you again, Kevin, on this, but you know what? We don't have time for a debate. We'll talk about this at another time. Adam, let's leave it with you. The final word on this. What is one change that's going to revert? Like something that's happened this year that, this is massively different, but it actually just going to reverse back in 2021?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Everything
things that have changed this year are here for good.
Wow. Okay. On that decisive end note, I think that's the end of the show. So, wow. Thank you, everybody. What an amazing chat. I think we need to have another conversation on this. This will go on and on and on. And of course, we've got like a big event happening in November for the United States and in fact for the entire planet, I believe, because the presidential election, I think, has huge recruiting impact. For lots of reasons, global economic reasons, intrusion of state reasons, also push back on things like diversity and inclusion and stuff like that. It's very clear where, this direction is going. So I think there's all kinds of cascade effects on that. We'll have to bring you guys back if you're prepared to have a conversation on this, because I think I'm going to do like a US election special on the 6th of November or something, after a couple of days, once you've recovered from either the hangover or the hangover, and we'll do that on that note.
You may want to wait a week so we know the results.
Yeah.
Wait a week or two after the election so we'll actually know the results.
You're right, because there is this weird scenario where you got to count. There's like staggered counting or something, isn't there, where people don't know until every vote is counted, and there's mail votes coming in and all that type of stuff. Crazy. Okay, super exciting times. Fingers crossed for the right results. Thank you everyone for joining the show. Kevin Wheeler, great to have you on. Sarah Brennan, great to have you on as well. Adam, as always, awesome to have you as co-pilot. Remember, folks, subscribe to the newsletter. There's going to be an awesome issue coming out on Sunday. Make sure you do that. And by the way, if you've watched this show and we're a little bit concerned about your future career, we are going to be talking about alternative careers for recruiters next week's Brainfood. So we're going to be talking to a bunch of people that have actually moved out of the industry and have done different things pre-COVID, and they hopefully will give us a little bit of indication as to what other options are available to us, because we do have a lot of skills, we do have a lot of energy, we do have a lot of adaptability and resilience. So I think we're going to be good in many respects, but it may mean some radical changes. So that will be exciting. Okay, Adam, you're about to say something before
I was going to say, Kevin, I'm really sorry. I don't know whether you were ever a recruiter, but certainly three of us are no longer recruiters and were. So we've got quite a few different people who can give examples of what career opportunities there are.
We are still in it though. In many respects, we're kind of like hanging on we're like hanging on the dog hairs of recruiting. We're still there,
All right, leeches on the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And the health of the industry is totally dependent. So we'll see on that. Okay, that's about it. Thank you again to our sponsors, Workable. They are awesome ATS. You should check them out if you're thinking about upgrading now or in the near future. We'll be back next week. Follow the channel, everybody. If you like this content, we'll see you next week on Friday. And have a good weekend, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
What do you reckon, Adam? Was that all right?
That was the reason I'm smiling is because, quite honestly, that was probably my favorite Brainfood Live ever. That's probably the one I've enjoyed more than any other that we've done, and I enjoyed almost all of them. Occasionally, there's one where I'm not quite, it wasn't so good, but that's probably the one I've enjoyed best of all of them.
I've enjoyed it as well. By the way, we're still going live, but I'm thinking, because we chat before the show anyway, just before we press all the buttons. I reckon we should do like a quick wash up as well afterwards, because we do that anyway. You know what I'm saying? We say, yeah, that was all right. We should also say, was that all right? And I reckon it was all right. I really enjoyed it. Kevin was amazing. Sarah was absolutely awesome. People in the chat stream, amazing. This is one of the only thing that really pisses me off is that I'm not able to get on all of the different chats because there's people on LinkedIn I haven't addressed, and Facebook, of course, I haven't addressed. Periscope, it's out there, like anybody watching there. I need to find a way. So if anybody out there still listening has got a way for me to interact with everybody there, that would be amazing. I need a single dashboard where I can see everything. I probably need to buy a new computer. I think that's what I've got to do, get multi-screened. Do you see Lars Schmidt's setup? Yeah, like 5 different curved screens and all this. And it's like
that's amazing.
This is my setup.
One bit of evidence of why I enjoyed that so much is because I've actually written down 7 different things, some from Sarah and some from Kevin. I've written 7 different things that I'm going to tweet like this evening that they said, just quotes that they said.
Yeah, I mean,
Jerry's right. There are plenty of alternative futures than the ones described. I mean, that is true. I need
to compliment all the people with purple avatars there, because Cecily, I think it is, and Jerry, you've been amazing with your contributions. So thank you very much. One thing I can ask you two to do is please complete your profile with your full name and stick a picture on it, because that will really help us understand who the hell you are. And this is the way in which new guests come on and all that type of stuff. It's really useful and valuable. Okay, anyway, that's about it. There's still 33 people watching, but you shouldn't be because the show's technically over. So I'll see you next week. Catch you later. Make sure you sign up to it. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Cheers.